what if the very things you think make you a quote unquote good person, your compassion, your patience, your lifelong search for the truth, what if those are actually symptoms of a deep psychological sickness?
It is a wildly uncomfortable thought.
It really is. So today, we are opening up the private, honestly kind of chaotic notebooks of a man who believed our entire moral compass is completely broken. We're doing a deep dive into Friedrich Nietzsche's The Will to Power.
And we should clarify right off the bat, we are specifically looking at the edition translated and edited by Walter Kaufman and R.J. Hollingdale.
Right, because the specific edition really matters here, doesn't it?
It's crucial. I mean, to even begin to understand the diagnosis Nietzsche's making about humanity, you kind of have to understand the physical reality of the text we're holding.
Because it's not actually a book, like not in the traditional sense. We are essentially reading his unedited workshop notes.
Exactly. It was never a finished book. What you're reading is this massive collection of raw notes, jottings, just fragments written between, I think, 1883 and 1888.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and he wrote these down in a format scholars often refer to as aphorisms.
Right. I feel like I hear that word thrown around in philosophy classes a lot, but in plain English, an aphorism is just a brief, punchy observation, right? It's not a full chapter or a structured essay.
That is a great way to put it. They're just fragmented thoughts. Sometimes it's a paragraph, sometimes literally just a single sentence.
Right.
And that raw, fragmented state is exactly what allowed the text's reputation to be so heavily manipulated after his death.
Oh, yeah. The history here is fascinating. It's like a massive cautionary tale about how information can be weaponized.
Completely. So after Nietzsche died, his sister, Elizabeth Förster Nietzsche, she took these disorganized fragments and published them as his, quote, crowning systematic achievement.
Which is just a total fabrication.
Right. She rearranged them to look like a final, definitive, cohesive philosophy.
Which obviously implies an overarching structure that Nietzsche himself never actually established.
He never approved it. And, that false framing had immense historical consequences.
Yeah.
To impartially report the history laid out in our sources here, a philosopher named Alfred Boimler wrote the postscript for a very widely read 1930 edition of this fabricated book.
Okay.
And after Hitler came to power, Boimler became a prominent professor in Berlin, and his specific interpretation of Nietzsche's notes was absorbed into that era's political ideology.
And didn't the sister have ties to all that, too?
She did. Elizabeth's late husband was a prominent anti-Semite. And the irony is, Nietzsche himself had explicitly excoriated anti-Semitism on multiple occasions in his writings.
Right. He hated it.
He despised it. But because these were raw notes, they were easily hijacked, taken out of context, and reframed to fit a narrative that he was totally against.
So after World War II, did scholars try to go in and, fix this manipulated version?
They did try. In the 1950s, a scholar named Karl Schlechte decided to discredit the manipulated version entirely by arranging all of the notes strictly chronologically.
Okay, that makes sense.
You'd think so. But that created a completely different problem. It resulted in a chaotic, unreadable mess.
Wait, why? Why would chronological order make it unreadable? Shouldn't that just show his exact train of thought over time?
Well, researchers discovered Nietzsche had a remarkably chaotic habit of using his notebooks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he would write from front to back, then flip the book over and write from back to front.
You're kidding.
No, he would skip across random pages, and sometimes he'd only write on the right-hand side of the book. So a strictly chronological arrangement of those nights just gives you absolute mental whiplash.
That is wild. It's like trying to read someone's diary by grouping the entries by the brand of pen they were using that day.
Exactly.
The dates just don't give you the narrative. Which I guess brings us to our mission for this deep dive.
Yes.
We are stripping away the political myths, the bad editing, and the chronological chaos to get a backstage pass into the mind of an isolated genius. We are looking at his rawest, most potent ideas about meaninglessness, the exhaustion of modern society, and the psychological origins of religion.
Right. And if we want to understand how Nietzsche proposes we navigate a broken world, we have to start with his diagnosis of the disease infecting it.
And he calls that disease nihilism. In the text, he famously describes it as the uncanniest of all guests standing at the door.
Yeah, he lays this out in the very first aphorisms of the collection. Nihilism, to Nietzsche, means that the highest values have devaluated themselves.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
It basically means the ultimate aim is lacking. When human beings look up at the universe and ask why, the question just finds no answer.
See, I always trip up on this concept. Because my default assumption, and I think a lot of people's default assumption, right, is that nihilism comes from misery.
Right. Like a natural reaction to suffering.
Exactly. Like if someone is struggling to pay rent or living through a war or dealing with intense social distress, obviously they are going to feel like the world is meaningless. Doesn't nihilism just stem from intense suffering?
It sounds completely logical, but Nietzsche explicitly rejects that premise. Yeah. In Aphorism 1, he states that social distress or physiological degeneration do not cause nihilism. In fact, he argues that the age he's living in, the late 19th century, is the most decent and compassionate age in history up to that point.
Wow. And we could certainly say the same for our modern era, right? With all our unprecedented medical and technological comforts.
Exactly. Distress, whether it's physical, mental, or economic, does not automatically give birth to a crisis of meaning.
Then what does? Because people have suffered horribly throughout history. I mean, plagues, famines, conquests, and they didn't all suddenly become nihilists.
No, they didn't, because distress always permits a variety of interpretations.
Okay.
Think about a medieval peasant suffering through a plague. They might interpret their suffering as a test from God or, a punishment for sin. But crucially, it still had meaning.
Ah, I see.
Distress alone doesn't cause a crisis of meaning. Rather, it is a specific interpretation of distress that causes it. And for Nietzsche, that specific interpretation is the Christian moral one.
That is so relevant. Think about how we operate today. We constantly try to cure our modern existential dread with better economic policies, or a new mindfulness app, or faster technology.
Yeah, a new gadget will fix the void.
Right. We are trying to fix the material conditions, completely missing Nietzsche's point that the crisis isn't in our material conditions at all. The crisis is in our values.
And the tragic irony he points out is that our sense of meaning wasn't destroyed by a lack of morality. Our sense of meaning was actually destroyed by our morality.
Okay, I'm struggling to visualize that mechanism. How does a drive for morality accidentally kill our sense of meaning?
He details this psychological mechanism across aphorisms 3, 5, and 12. Think about the values Christian morality championed over centuries. It placed a massive premium on the concept of truthfulness.
Like, thou shalt not lie.
Exactly. You must not lie. You must confess. You must seek the ultimate pure truth. But as mankind developed this incredibly rigorous, almost scientific demand for truth, it eventually turned that very lens back onto Christian morality itself.
Oh, wow. So we trained ourselves to be obsessive truth seekers, and then we turned the magnifying glass on the religion that taught us to be truth seekers in the first place?
Precisely. And when that rigorous standard of truth looked closely at the moral interpretation of the world, it concluded that the system was full of fabrications.
It really is like a computer software program that is explicitly coded to hunt down and delete corrupted files.
Yes, great analogy.
It scans the whole computer for years, and eventually the program realizes its own foundational operating system is a corrupted file. So, following its own prime directive, it deletes itself.
That is a perfect analogy for how truthfulness essentially ate itself. To understand the fallout of that deletion, we have to look at the three main categories mankind used to give the universe value.
Okay, what are they?
They are aim, unity, and truth. First, we wanted to believe the universe had a grand aim or goal. Second, we wanted to believe in a grand unity. Nietzsche discusses this as a form of monism.
Wait, before we go further, what exactly does he mean by monism in this context?
Monism is the idea that everything in existence is one single substance or system. There are no distinct, isolated parts. Everything is a valuable thread in an infinite, unified cosmic tapestry.
Like we're all one.
Exactly. We desperately wanted to believe we were part of a unified whole. And third, we wanted to believe in a true world, a perfect divine realm that exists beyond this messy physical one.
But then our rigorous truth-seeking software runs its final scan.
It runs the scan, and it realizes the universe doesn't possess a grand aim. It doesn't have a unified, intelligent design. And there was absolutely no hidden true world beyond this physical reality.
So the whole thing just falls apart.
Right. We pull those three categories out of our worldview, the architecture collapses.
Yeah.
But here's the catastrophic psychological consequence. Because we had spent centuries measuring the value of the real world against a purely fictitious beyond, once the beyond is gone, the real world suddenly looks completely valueless.
Oh, man. We basically convinced ourselves that only this imaginary perfect realm had value, and the real world was just a dirty temporary waiting room. So once we realize the waiting room is actually all there is, we think it's worthless.
We're still using the old categories to judge a universe that doesn't fit them. The system crashes.
So if the system crashes and we realize the universe doesn't care about us, does everyone just become paralyzed and depressed? Like, how do human beings react to that void?
Well, Nietzsche observes that we split into two distinct camps based on our internal strength. In Aphorisms 22 and 23, he breaks nihilism down into two paths, active nihilism and passive nihilism.
I would assume active nihilism is the stronger of the two.
It is. Active nihilism is a sign of increased power of the spirit. It's a realization of meaninglessness that actually gives you strength. It reaches its maximum strength as a violent force of destruction.
Destruction of the old values, like taking a sledgehammer to the remaining architecture.
Yes, exactly. The active nihilist sees that the old convictions have become incommensurate with reality. Instead of mourning them, they tear them down to clear the ground.
Wow.
It's the pessimism of active energy. They want to sweep away the debris.
So if active nihilists are out there aggressively tearing down dead values to clear the ground, what are the rest of us doing? Are we just like victims caught in the crossfire?
The rest of society falls into passive nihilism, which is a sign of weakness and decline. The spirit is exhausted. When the old values dissolve, the passive nihilist doesn't have the strength to posit new goals or clear the rubble.
So what do?
It leads to a weary numbing of the self. Nietzsche associates this with a sort of European Buddhism, a yearning for nothingness, a desperate attempt to just escape the friction of existence.
This is where reading these notes gets eerie. Nietzsche's description of 19th century weariness sounds exactly like our modern era.
Oh, 100%.
Think about how we wake up and immediately scroll through our feeds, reacting to 50 different global crises, controversies, and tragedies before we've even had breakfast. We just numb ourselves with a constant stream of noise.
He is diagnosing that exact psychological state. In Aphorism 71, he gives a brilliant critique of what he calls modernity. He says our sensibilities become immensely irritable.
Irritable, yeah.
He uses the musical term prestissimo, which means to play at a remarkably fast tempo, to describe the speed of impressions flooding into our minds. We have this cosmopolitan influx of foods, literatures, and newspapers. The impressions are so fast and so dense that they erase each other.
We completely lose the power to digest the information.
And because of this flood, we instinctively resist taking anything in deeply. It's a defense mechanism. We unlearn spontaneous action. We merely react to external stimuli.
Just constantly reacting.
Right. We spend all our vital energy assimilating, defending, or opposing whatever was just put in front of us. He calls it a profound weakening of spontaneity.
That is so convicting. We think we are being engaged, active citizens by arguing online or absorbing all this global trauma, but Nietzsche is saying we are actually just exhausted. We've become purely reactive creatures.
He calls this physiological state decadence, and it is a foundational concept in these notebooks. He argues that the very things modern society praises, like extreme moral sensitivity, excessive pity, and altruism, are actually symptoms of this physiological exhaustion.
Wait, pity is exhaustion. How does that work?
Well, if you are bursting with vitality and strength, you help others out of a surplus of your own power.
Right.
But if you are in a state of decadence, you are hypersensitive. You suffer when others suffer, multiplying the suffering in the world. These traits aren't signs of moral superiority. They are signs that we lack the vital strength to act forcefully. So we elevate our hypersensitivity and weakness into a virtue.
That is a massive paradigm shift. But wait, if these exhausted, decadent values are so harmful to human vitality, if they literally drain our ability to act spontaneously and create our own meaning, how did they become the dominant moral operating system of the entire world?
To answer that, we have to look at Nietzsche's psychological deconstruction of religion in Aphorisms 135 and 136. He asks a fascinating question. Where did the concept of God actually originate in the human psyche?
And he doesn't think it came from fear of the dark or natural disasters, does he?
No, not at all. He argues it originates from extreme feelings of power. Yes. Imagine an early, naive person who is suddenly suffused with a massive feeling of power or a profound burst of love or an incredible moment of inspiration. They feel an overwhelming exaltation. But because human psychology is fragile, they are terrified by this feeling. It feels totally foreign to their everyday experience.
So they assume it can't possibly belong to them. They don't dare take credit for their own greatness.
Exactly. They split their personality. They take the weak, paltry, fearful, mundane part of themselves and call that man. And they take the strong, astonishing, powerful part of themselves, project it outward, and attribute it to God. They experience their own highest states as a divine visitation.
That is incredibly tragic. Humanity acts as a poet and a creator, builds this magnificent image of strength, gives it away to an imaginary being, and then worships that being while feeling wretched and small about itself.
It is a tragedy of self-alienation, but it creates a structural vulnerability in society. And this is where the figure of the priest enters the picture in aphorisms 139 and 141.
The priest. So this is where the power dynamics of morality really take shape. But I have to ask, if the priest has no physical weapons, no army, and no warrior strength, why did the strong, powerful people listen to him? Why didn't kings and warriors just ignore the priest entirely?
Because the priest attacks the mind. The priest wants to rule, but as you said, he lacks physical dominance. So how does he gain power over those who have it? He inserts himself as the indispensable intermediary to this god. He tells the people, including the strong warriors, that they cannot access their own projected greatness without his specific rituals, mediations, and approvals. He weaponizes the unknown.
Oh, wow. So he sets up a toll booth on the human soul. You can't reach the divine without paying his tax.
A perfect metaphor. And to enforce this mental domination, the priest invents what Nietzsche calls the holy lie.
How does the holy lie operate? What's the mechanism there?
It's a system of concepts designed to control human behavior from the inside out. The holy lie includes the invention of a punishing God who sees everything, the concept of an afterlife where the ultimate punishment or reward is handed out, and most insidiously, the invention of conscience.
Conscience. But society tells us that having a strong conscience is the exact definition of being a good person.
According to Nietzsche, the priest's holy lie completely unhinges human reason. It takes human motives, which naturally should be based on cause and effect, on what actually promotes life and vitality, and reduces them to mere fear of punishment and hope for reward in a fake afterlife.
Wow.
Conscience in this context is just a false inner voice. It's a conditioned reflex that tells you God is speaking whenever you obey the priest's rule.
It's essentially psychological conditioning. You internalize the priest's commands so deeply that you police yourself.
Yes, exactly. So the so-called good man, the obedient, self-denying, hypersensitive person, is actually the worst mutilation of humanity. Nietzsche sees this good man as a castrated, tame animal that has been made completely dependent on priestly guardianship.
Jesus.
The natural, forward-striving, vital spirit has been broken and replaced with guilt.
It is a stunning, aggressive reversal of how we are taught to view history. He's arguing that the moral leaders who claim to be improving mankind were actually systematically weakening it just to maintain their own authority.
And this brings us full circle to his diagnosis of passive nihilism. When that priestly system of values finally collapses under the weight of its own demand for truthfulness, what is left?
The void.
Right. The tame, exhausted animal it created is left wandering in the void. They have no God, no afterlife, and because they were trained to be weak, they have no internal vital strength to create new values. They just consume information at a prestissimo tempo and suffer.
So, if we look back at the journey we've taken through these messy, chaotic notebooks, we can see the entire architecture of his thought. He strips away the illusion that our modern weariness is just a byproduct of daily stress. He diagnoses it as the collapse of a moral interpretation that told us the real world was worthless.
And this leaves a challenge squarely at our feet. In a world drowning in the noise of passive nihilism, Nietzsche is asking you to recognize the profound exhaustion hidden inside traditional values.
Yeah.
He's asking you to see how much of what we politely call goodness is actually just a fear of living forcefully and taking risks.
We have to stop avoiding the void. Only by facing the meaninglessness of the universe head-on without the comfort of the holy lie can you begin the hard work of active nihilism. It's architectural work. You have to actively clear the rubble of these dead values to build something new.
It's not about wallowing in the emptiness. It's about finding the strength to become the architect of your own meaning.
If active nihilism requires us to tear down the old values and build our own, how do we know if we've succeeded? Like, what is the metric for a life well lived if there is no God and no afterlife to judge us? I want to leave you with a final haunting concept found deep in aphorism 55.
Ah, yes.
It's an idea Nietzsche calls the eternal recurrence, and he refers to it as the most extreme form of nihilism. Imagine if existence, exactly as it is right now, without any hidden meaning, without any grand finale or salvation, were to recur eternally.
Every pain you felt, every joy, every mundane commute, every mistake, looping forever in the exact same sequence.
Could you endure living your exact life over and over again for all eternity? Or better yet, could you find the internal strength to actively love it? To say a profound, unhesitating yes to it? When the grand architecture of meaning collapses, the passive patient sits in the rubble and gives up. But the active patient looks at the chaotic, messy reality of existence, accepts it completely, and decides to build a life they would gladly live on repeat forever. It's a profound test of your own vitality to mull over long after this deep dive ends.